Hello everybody, I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated, and I am creating another multi-class 5th edition build here. A couple things I want to mention about this one. This build is strong. It's not as massively overpowered as some builds can be. However, if you're in a low or no magic campaign, this build is ridiculously powerful. Because of the access to items that you get and because of some of the bonuses that you can occur. So, the way this build works is we're going to start with Artificer. I wanted to try something with Artificer, and I think that this can be very fun. So first off with Artificer, you've got to make your decision as to what build you're going in Artificer. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of go with an Iron Man concept, which ended up turning more into a Doctor Doom concept, and you'll hear that a little later. But this ends up being an Artificer build. And the Artificer Armorer. So what does the Armorer get you? What the Armorer gets you is the first thing and the most important thing is something called Arcane Armor and your armor model. So what Arcane Armor does is say no matter what kind of armor you're wearing, if there would normally be a strength requirement, it no longer has that requirement. You can use your Arcane Armor as a spellcasting focus, which means that you can cast just by having your armor. And the armor attaches to you and cannot be removed against your will. It also expands to cover your entire body, although you can retract or deploy the helmet as a bonus action. The armor replaces any missing limbs, function identically to a body part that it is replacing, which is just ridiculously cool. The armor continues to be Arcane Armor until you don another suit of armor or until you die. Now, that's the first part to it, which means that you can go with the strength of an Artificer, which is usually intelligence. Second, armor model. Here's where we get some fun parts to it. Now, what I did with armor model was I decided to go with the Guardian model, but I'm going to go over both real quick because I may make a video based on the Infiltrator model later. So what does the Guardian model do? First, it gives you Thunder Gauntlets. Each of your armor's gauntlets count as a simple melee weapon while you aren't holding anything in it, and it deals 1d8 thunder damage on a hit. A creature hit by the gauntlet has a disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you until the start of your next turn. Your armor magically emits a distracting pulse when the creature attacks someone else. So you basically are the tank when using this, and you could be wearing plate with no strength modifier necessary. Now, another important thing about the armor model there's another thing in Guardian, but I'll get to that in a second, but the other really important part in armor model is that when you use your special weapon, when you attack with that weapon, you can add your intelligence modifier instead of strength or dex to the attack and damage roll. Also, you can change your model when you finish a short or long rest, provided you have Smith's tools in hand. We're going to get to that in a minute. You're always going to have Smith's tools. So, we're going with the Thunder Gauntlets for Guardian, and then you also have something called Defensive Field. As a bonus action, you can gain temporary hit points equal to your level in this class, replacing any temporary hit points you had. You lose those temporary hit points if you doff the armor. You can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency modifier, your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses after a long rest. Now, one thing to remember with multi-class builds is your proficiency bonus is based on your total class level, not your class level in a specific class. So once again, this build is going to be based on level 20, but this build also would start by probably going up all the levels of Artificer first, which would be 10 levels of Artificer. The reason why you would do that is, again, in case you're playing a low magic campaign, I'll explain when we get to the stats as to why you would do this. But there's multiple ways you can build this. You can build this using strength and kind of having an okay intelligence, or you can go with your straight intelligence build and you can kind of ignore strength because one of the options that you have by the time you get to level 10 is you have the option to create your own magic items that you would attach to your armor. And we'll go over that once we get to the end of the armor. Now, another thing we get to is at level 5, you do get an extra attack in this build. So you will have 2 attacks. Now, legitimately, you're going to have 2 attacks another way as well. But again, we'll get to that a little later. At level 9, you get armor modifications. What this does is you can use your Artificer Infusions to specifically modify your Arcane Armor. What that means is that your armor now counts as separate items for the purposes of infuse item. So you can infuse your armor as your armor, the chest piece, your boots, your helmet, and your special weapon. So at that point, you can put an infusion on your weapon to give it bonus to hit and damage. You can put an infusion on, you can put boots on, which I will, and you can buff your armor to make it so that you, again, raise your armor class pretty significantly. The other thing that this level 9 one does is make it so that the number of maximum items you can fuse at once is increased by 2. So because of that, you now will have, once we go back to the original class, we're going to have at this point 6 infusions we can do at any specific given time. And 2 of those must be part of your Arcane Armor, but that's not exactly a problem. So to go back to Artificer main, the other things we need to remember is magical tinkering. You can create a tool that has that can record messages. It can shine bright light in a small area. It can smell, stuff like that. You do get spell casting, and by the time we would get to 10th level, you will have 3rd level spells. So that's another thing. Infuse items. By the time we get to level 10, we will be able to infuse. We have 8 infusions known, and we can infuse 4 items normally. But because of our armor build, we can infuse 6. And you are allowed to have additional magical items connected to you with this build specifically, because that's what Artificer does. Next, you get right tool for the job, which basically gives you, you can have special artisan tools that allows you to create, you can magic create one set of artisan tools in an unoccupied space, so you can create whatever tools you need. At 6th level, you get tool expertise, which means your proficiency is doubled with any ability check that uses a proficiency with a tool. Flash of Genius you get at level 7, which is a lot of fun. At 7th level, you've gained the ability to come up with solutions under pressure. When you or another creature you can see within 30 feet of you makes an ability check or saving throw, you can use your reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. So that's a really, really useful ability. And you can use this ability a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, which is again the reason why going with the intelligence build works really well. Finally, we get Magic Item Adept, which allows us to attune 4 items instead of 3. And if you craft magical items you can craft magical items with a rarity of common or uncommon, and it takes 1/4 the time as normal and 1/2 the cost as normal. So you can attune 4 instead of 3, which is fantastic. And you can put a bunch of arcane infusions on your gear. Now, arcane infusions. There's a couple of them that are really important or really useful at the very least. First, you can, one of the things that I would do is I would be doing something with enhanced defense. Enhanced defense allows you to gain a +1 armor bonus to either armor or a shield. I believe, yeah, it does say, unless a infusion's description says otherwise, you can't learn an infusion more than once. So you can't do the same infusion more than once here, so we can only do it on 1 armor or shield. However, at level 10, the bonus does increase to 2, so we can do a +2 armor or +2 shield, and it's not as common to have those, and we're going to be able to do a +1 armor or shield with another infusion. Another one we can do is enhanced weapon. Again, at level 10, you can make it a +2 weapon. This is a kind of simple. I actually like a different one a little bit better, but again, it's up to you. Radiant weapon is one that I do like quite a bit. You have to be at least level 6 for this one. This makes it so it's a +1 weapon, but also you can take a bonus action for it to shed 30 feet of dim light, or 30 feet bright light, and additional 30 feet of dim light. The wielder can extinguish the light as a bonus action. You have 4 charges. Immediately after being hit by an attack, you can spend a charge to cause the attacker to be blinded until the end of the next turn. Unless the attacker succeeds on a Constitution saving throw against your spell DC, they become blinded. So you can use a reaction to being hit by an attack to blind them with your weapon, which is just cool. Another thing that I would probably be using this for the armor or for the shield, I would probably use the Repulsion Shield, just because Repulsor. A creature gains a +1 armor class while wielding this shield. The shield has 4 charges. While holding it, the wielder can use a reaction immediately after being hit by a melee attack to expend one of the shield's charges and push the attacker 15 feet away. So again, pretty cool idea. So that way you can go with +2 of armor for your armor, +1 armor on your shield. Again, you don't need magic items in the game to do this. You're creating them. And finally, the most important one is replicate magic item. This one you are allowed to learn multiple times because you can choose a different item to replicate each time. It specifically says that you can learn this infusion multiple times. Each time, choose a magic item that you can make with it, picking from the replicable items table. Now, you obviously have to choose a couple of those 2nd level, 6th level, or 10th level items. Now, obviously, for a 10th level item, one of the things that I would go with immediately, just because of the fact that I want this to truly be an armor suit, is winged boots. Now, I wouldn't call them winged per se. I would just call them like repulsor jets or something like that. But the idea is with winged boots, you can create them and then be able to fly using your suit of armor, and it's considered part of your armor because the boots and the gloves and a helmet would be considered part of it. Or no, it's the boots. It's boots, chests, weapon, and helmet. There's a couple of helmets that are available in here, but one of the other things that I would probably do with this is I would go for the Gauntlets of Ogre Power. You can also create the Gauntlets of Ogre Power at level as a 10th level infusion, and if you go with the Gauntlets of Ogre Power, what you can do at that point is you can now have whatever strength you want, put on the Gauntlets of Ogre Power, and you now have a strength of 19, and that helps for several parts of saving throws, and also for the fact that what you want to multi-class into involves having strength modifiers. Now, one of the things, of course, there is that is 2 10th level items. Your infusions make it so you may have to redo one of your infusion choices once you get to a certain level, but you do get 2 new infusions when you go from 9 to 10, so you can just choose both of those as your 10th level infusion. So that's our Artificer. Next, we're going to go to Fighter. The reason I chose Fighter is because, first of all, I want fighting style. You can choose a couple of different fighting styles, but my main reason for wanting to do this is I want to go with the armor build. I want to basically be a tank. So I went with defense to just give myself another +1 to AC. Now, you also get a martial archetype, and the martial archetype I chose for this is another new one from Tasha's, which is the Rune Knight. Now, before I get into Rune Knight, I do want to say Action Surge is amazing, and having an Action Surge does always make things better. Giving yourself 4 attacks in any given round instead of 2 is amazing, especially when you have things that go off until end of turn. So, Rune Knight. The idea behind a Rune Knight is a couple of things. First, you get bonus proficiencies when you at level 3. All right, proficiencies include the fact that you now learn how to speak Giant, and you also get the ability to use tools for even further. We're going to get into more tools in a minute when we talk about some of the runes. So one of the cool things about this is that you get runes. At 3rd level, you get 2 runes known. At 7th level, you get 3 runes known. There's a couple of really cool 3rd level runes. My favorite one, of course, is Fire Rune. So what Fire Rune does is you double proficiency for any tool you know, which means you can now do double proficiency on your tools to help you, recreate your armor. So Artificer's tools and things like that. Also, you can you can activate a bonus that basically gives you the ability to have 2d6 additional fire damage added to any attack you make. Also, they have to make a saving throw after that. It's a strength save. It's based on your constitution. And if they fail the strength saving throw, they are restrained and take an additional 2d fire at the start of anyone's turn. So it's kind of a hold person on a weapon swing, which is ridiculously cool, but also it's just add some fire damage and, again, double proficiency with an item. So that's, again, a very cool idea. The other runes, there's a couple of other runes that I really like the idea of. One of the other runes that I really like the idea of is the Frost rune. So what the Frost rune does is, as a bonus action, you increase in sturdiness. For 10 minutes, you gain a +2 bonus to all ability checks and saving throws that use strength or constitution. This build is going to kind of have a good strength because of the gauntlets. It's going to have a good intelligence because it's your main stat. But also, I've gone with the gnome build, because this will be a gnome, that increases your constitution as well. Now, one reason why I went with gnomes, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is because, first of all, gnomes are the natural tinkerers, and you can go with the hill gnome, which basically makes it so that you get some magical tinkerers a bit added to you, as well as getting a +1 constitution modifier. Gnomes get +2 intelligence, +1 constitution at that point, which is really good for your build. So this gives you a bonus to strength and constitution checks for 10 minutes, which definitely doesn't suck. What it does all the time is it gives you advantage on wisdom, animal handling, and charisma intimidation checks. Now, you don't have to choose the Frost rune, but I think it's kind of neat. Finally, I went with the Hill rune, which is a 7th level rune. You will be going 7 levels in this for this version of the build. Again, you don't have to go 7 levels, but we'll go over why I went to 7 levels in a minute. So what you do with that is you automatically have advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and resistance against poison damage, but this also gives you some more defensive abilities. As a bonus action, you can gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for 1 minute. So if you're in melee, you can now have very high AC and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for 1 minute, which is really, really good. We haven't even gone over what the AC value is, but we'll go over that again in a minute. So next, we have, those are the 3 runes that at least I would pick. You could go a different way if you want to. Giant's Might is another ability that you get doing this, which is if you are smaller than large, as a bonus action, you can become large. And along with anything you're wearing. And you don't get any of the minuses for becoming large. You get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and once per turn, you can add an additional d6 damage to any weapon or unarmed strike. So congratulations, we just added a d6 to an attack every round. I think that's very cool. The other thing that you're going to get from Rune Knight is the Runic Shield. At 7th level, you learn to invoke your rune magic to protect your allies. When another creature you can see within 60 feet of you is hit by an attack roll, you can use your reaction to force the attacker to re-roll the d20 and use a new roll. And you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency modifier. So, we have multiple ways of making it so that people can't attack on people other than you, and you are taking less damage in melee because of the fact that you can give yourself resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Now, additional to that, in general fighter abilities, fighter gets their ability score improvements more often. So you would get an ability score improvement at 4 and 6, which is the reason why this build still has 4 ability improvements, which is really nice. You do also get a Indomitable, which allows you to re-roll any 1 failed saving throw, which again can be very useful. So we are now at 17. So the final 3 levels, I will say I did this strictly for power purposes, because I do want people to still just say this build has some strength to it, and that's going to be going into Paladin. I know it's a bit of a cop-out, but I did it anyway. So the last 3 levels are going into Paladin. Obviously, there's several reasons to do this. First, you get another fighting style. So at this point, you could take the +2 to damage for using a one-handed weapon and no other weapon because you're going weapon shield. Or if you want to, you can go protection and again give another friendly disadvantage on an attack roll, although it's not really that necessary. The extra damage does seem kind of nice. Of course, you also get the main reason to go into this, which is Divine Smite. Remember, you can use any of your spells for Divine Smite, not just Paladin spells. So although you only have 3 first-level Paladin spells, you have 2 third-level and I think 3 first and 3 second-level Artificer spells that you can also use for Divine Smite. So you have a lot of smiting opportunities. You have a lot of abilities that you can play around with that. Smite is obviously very strong, and we can add on the fire damage. We can add on the d6 on 1 extra attack roll each turn. We have the brightness of the attacks and all of that we can add in. You're also going to be able to get multiple other ways of being able to add a d6 to your spells, depending on what builds you go with and what spells you take. But the idea here is you're still doing a considerable amount of damage. You are very defensive, and we still haven't gotten into the Sacred Oath. And the Sacred Oath that I've decided to go for Paladin is the Oath of Vengeance. Now, why go for Oath of Vengeance? First, you get Hunter's Mark as a bonus spell, which means that you can now just add another d6 to all of your attacks. And second, your Channel Divinity Vow of Enmity makes it so that as a bonus action, you can utter a vow of enmity against a creature you can see within 10 feet. You gain advantage on attack rolls against this creature for 1 minute or until it drops to 0 hit points or falls unconscious. So you can basically go into a boss fight and say, all right, I'm going to add d6s to all my attacks. I'm going to add 2d6 on an attack relatively early. I'm going to be able to smite all day long. I'm going to add another d6 on top of that, and I'm going to have advantage on every single attack roll I make. So that's the reason why we get to kind of having a bit of an overpowered build. But that's really going just into the fact that we're taking Channel Divinity, we're adding d6s here, d8s there. We can use our intelligence modifier to attack, so we only need 1 stat. We can add to our strength without actually having to try, and although we do have to have at least a 13 charisma to go into Paladin, we don't particularly care about any of the saving throws for Paladin because we're never going to use them. So, what is the armor class of this build? What is the defense? First things first, we can go straight into plate armor because we don't have any minuses to it, and we're creating our own arcane armor. So that gets us to an 18 straight off the top of the bat. Next, we're going to be wielding a shield, which gets us to a 20. Next, we're going defensive, which gets us to 21, because one of our 2 fighting styles we can take defensive. After we do that, we can now also give ourselves +2 armor from one of our infusions, and +1 armor to the shield for another one of our fusions, which means we're up to a 24 armor class without actually doing anything special. Now, there's ways to be able to get a slightly higher armor class if you really want to, going into different classes, but the 24 is what I've decided to stick with for this. You don't get shield in this case, so that's not really a great thing to go with. But having a 24 armor class and making it so that you can basically have resistance against most damage attacks that are coming at you that are right there. You can have allies reroll their saving throws. You can use some of your other spells. You can definitely take Absorb Elements if you want, in case you have the issue of not wanting to have just physical attacks. You can have all elemental attacks as well. So you can kind of run around with a high but not brokenly high armor class. You do good but not ridiculously overpowered damage. And you have a lot of abilities that you can play around with, and you have a lot of skills that you can end up playing around with as well for this build. Now, how many skills do you actually have? I think you only end up getting like 6 skills or 7 skills with this build. So it's not super heavy in the role-playing for skills, but your tool proficiencies, you can end up getting double tool proficiency on several. And you can definitely be a tinkerer and go with that for being a gnome. Feats, there's not really any specific feats that we found completely necessary, or that I found, but like I was doing this with a friend, and we didn't really find any feats that are specifically necessary for this build. We just want to have a high strength. The strength, again, will come from the gauntlets. You want to have a high intelligence, and that's the main purpose of the build. that's really all we have to go into for this. There's obviously the one best part about this build is the fact that it's very versatile when it comes to what you want to do with it. And as I said, there's a second version of this build which would use a ranged version instead of the Guardian for the armor. And I'm going to go a little bit further into that to figure out how I want to build that. And we may do another video on that if I think that it's good enough to actually go over. But 24 AC, add D6s to most of your attacks, advantage on all your attack rolls, high AC, disadvantage against anyone who isn't attacking you, seems pretty solid. So, if you've got any questions, issues, let me know. In general, by the time this video comes out, I should have the character sheet ready for it. There is another version of the build that I was thinking about, which was going 10 fighter instead of going into paladin. Because as I said, the paladin is really just there for making the build more powerful, because paladin is really powerful. 2 or 3 levels of paladin is actually overpowered for practically any melee build. So that was why I did that for this build, but you could also go 10-10 just for more fun. Which would give you the access to one more stat boost as well. So if you got any questions, issues, let me know. If you have anything that you want to talk about with it, let me know. If you've got any ideas, we can go over it if you want. If you like it, great. Like, subscribe. If you've got any comments, please comment. Hit the notification button if you want to see more videos like this. And that's all I got. So talk to you next time. Have a good day.